It's an honor to sit down with you, Dallas. Let's start, here we are in the middle of season 3. Let's start with how you think things are going differently than maybe season 1 when you started this project.
Yeah, I mean, I can say this honestly. I don't think about those things.
Yeah.
The fact that the audience is bigger doesn't change that when we're sitting in front of a blank computer screen and have to write an episode, we still have to make a show that people want to see and that honors the spirit and intentions of Jesus in the Gospels. So that part hasn't changed. This season is harder than it's ever been because of weather. We've had COVID issues. There's some scenes that we've done that are bigger. Other than that, the fact that it's harder, I can't let it feel different. I really have to focus on making sure that we never lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, we're just trying to make the best show that we can. And whether 10 people watch it or whether 100 million people watch it, that doesn't change our decision making and our creativity. It can't. If I start thinking about avoiding criticism or getting...
But how do you do that in a world where I think that is our tendency to do that? How do you help other people not worry about what others are saying, about what they're doing?
Well, it's God took it away from me several years ago. I mean, I struggled with narcissism and with people pleasing for most of my life, and I had a big career failure and kind of surrendered to God, and someone felt led to tell me in the middle of the night from across the world, it's not your job to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and fish. And that truth changed my life, and realizing that, okay, if I can just focus on making the best 5 loaves and the best 2 fish that I can, and delivering them to God, and at that point the transaction's over. And if he feeds 5,000 with it, or if doesn't, that's really not up to me. That truth changed my life, and it's what I practice. And so it's hard, and it took time to kind of get there, but it becomes a superpower when you genuinely don't care what people think, as long as you know that you're doing what you believe honors God. Not that doesn't mean I'm always right, but I just can't think about it. I can't think about it. And those who struggle with that, all I can say is just keep reading the story of the feeding of the 5,000. And if you think that the boy who gave Jesus the 5 loaves and 2 fish was responsible for feeding 5,000 people, then you might have a narcissism problem.
Amen. One of the biggest things I think that speaks to me when I've watched this show is when you see the disciples and you see, I think for whatever reason we assume that, they were kind of perfect people and that's why God and Jesus chose them. And this show just highlights so well, even despite how inadequate you may feel, right? I feel like everybody feels that's who God tends to choose and use. Do you ever feel inadequate? Like you go, okay, I don't know, am I measuring up to this? Do you ever, or does that just go into the piece of, I just don't
No,
anymore?
I for sure am not as good as the show is, and I'm for sure not as good as what's become of this. I know that. There's no amount of success the show that could have that would ever make me feel like I'm solely responsible for it. At the same time, I don't believe in kind of the browbeating false modesty and humility of like, I'm capable of nothing and God does it all. I mean, God does ask us to still put our 5 loaves and 2 fish. Yeah. He could have just magically caused fish to appear and loaves to appear in people's laps. But he said, I need you to go find some food. And then when he got the food and multiplied it, he said, I need you to go distribute it. He wants us to participate in the process. So I've worked very hard to get here. I feel like I have an obligation and a responsibility to work hard and to continue to deliver what God has asked me to deliver. And so I'm not going to waste too much time beating myself up over my own inadequacies. So there's this healthy tension between I'm working hard, I'm doing what I believe is right, I've worked really hard in the past, I've studied, I'm going to keep trying to get better at my job, we're going to build a good team, but at the end of the day, God's responsible for the results. And that's the ultimate truth that we reside in. But yeah, I struggle, I should say I feel inadequate, but I don't struggle with it.
Yeah. I consider myself a storyteller, as do you. I think it's so cool to look at Jesus as a storyteller, right? Sure. He was one of probably the best there is. Talk about the importance of being able to tell a good story, even from biblical times. This is how he did it. This is how he spread, his message.
Yeah, we hear that often in the show. Let me tell you a story. Or, let me put it this way. Storytelling is always, without exception, the most effective way to get someone's attention. The moment I say, even if I just said to someone, So I woke up this morning. I got out of bed. Immediately, person's like, and then what? And then I went to the bathroom and brushed my teeth. Like I've said boring things so far, but they're going, I do want to know what happens next. Now there's a limit. Eventually, when they realize you're not going to get to the point, they might tune out. But I believe that storytelling is always the most effective way to get someone's attention. Now, of course, the story you're telling matters, and the intention matters, and the end matters. But yeah, I think I've always been intrigued by storytelling, the desire to tell stories, the desire to hear stories, and it just so happens that I am telling a story about a storyteller. And it's really fun to make a show where our main character is often telling stories, but also to tell stories about him in a way that hasn't been told before. So it's kind of a cycle of creativity. Of you get to tell stories about a storyteller and use his stories to illustrate biblical truths.
I feel like in season 3, from what I gather too, we're going to see the disciples become more bold. And kind of what they're called to do and witness to others. And what's your take in 2022 to being bold and, kind of carrying that message and, in these times, that I think are very relatable.
Yeah. Well, I think what happens in season 3 that's interesting is Jesus in many ways demands it of them. Just like in the Gospels, there's this moment that's kind of strange where Jesus sends the disciples out 2 by 2 and gives them temporarily the power to heal and to cast out demons and to and they preach and they kind of carry out his ministry for this time, and then they come back and you don't hear about it happening again until he dies and resurrects. And so at first we show that they're kind of like, are you sure? Wait a minute, we're going to do it without you and without money and without more than the clothes on our back? This is kind of strange. And I think there's a lesson there of, okay, when we're asked to do hard things, we do them. And now what I think sometimes people do is, in today's world, is boldness is their excuse. I'm bold, I'm just being bold to do things that aren't necessarily the fruits of the Spirit. They're not necessarily God-honoring. And boldness becomes the top priority over gentleness and kindness and goodness and self-control and love. But if you've got those things, if you are pursuing the fruits of the Spirit, having the boldness and confidence about them to deliver them to others, even if that means just your neighbor or just your family member, that's where I think it comes from. And I think sometimes people think boldness means being louder or getting a wider audience. Yeah. And boldness can also just mean the boldness to serve your spouse.
Last question. I did want to touch on music because there was so much, I think, momentum and so much kind of, the Christmas special was awesome, and I think music has its own way of storytelling. Kind of touch on that, and I don't know if there's anything more that you can do with other Christian artists. Again, it seems so popular. How could we not do more of that?
Well, yeah, this year the show itself will be coming out around Christmas, so we're not doing another Christmas special. But I think there's something that the music even within the show has been really unique. Our composers, Dan and Matt, Dan Hasseltine's lead singer and songwriter, Darza Clay, I believe a true genius. The style of the music in the show is very unique. A lot of musicians and worship leaders have come to me and said the show has inspired them to write songs. The show has caused them to love and know Jesus even better, and worship is what comes when you know and love Jesus better. So there does seem to be this great relationship between the show and musicians, and then people who love music and want to be part of that. So we'll do it again. We've got more to come. We've got some albums and some soundtracks that we think we're in development on, because there's just so many great artists. I love doing great art. I love working with great artists, and like you said, it's all storytelling. So I think that's why it felt natural to do a Christmas special like that. And well, let's get season 3 out first.
All right. Well, Dallas, thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming.